Got the meeting on the permitting process to start at 6:15, so I think we've got time in case other people want to check in, go over some other items. But before we start, let's please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Scott, I know it's not on this week's agenda, but do we have any updates on the COVID? I saw a thing come through about a deadline for filing. Is there anything that we're gonna need to file for?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I did get a notice earlier from the municipal association, so I have to read that to see, what other finer things might happen. But there's nothing that I'm aware of, and I don't see us incurring any major expenses.
Well, I sent you an email the other day. I don't know if you got to read that, document that. New Hampshire Municipal Association had
Yeah.
forwarded, and it implied, at least my understanding of reading it, was they said all of your emergency responders, police, fire, etc., were covered under that for all of their time. And I said, well, if that's the case, that's totally different than my understanding.
Yeah, that's the first I've heard of that. If it was regular shifts and wasn't incurring additional shifts or overtime,
Yeah.
it didn't qualify for reimbursement of anything.
All right,
That's
so
the way the
you could-
original.
that
Yeah.
thing that they sent through, just follow up with them and see
Sure.
what they say. And I can't see how they could ever fund something like that in
Yeah.
the first place, but and did you say we're gonna have on August 11th, the response from Eversource for their opinion on the street lighting?
I was hoping to have it by now. I have not heard back from Paul Hossman.
Okay.
Can you Zoom
Have
people
any
here?
issues with the lighting submittals that Scott had forwarded?
I'm fine with them.
Okay. Let's see if we can wrap that one up next meeting then. The bid result on the loader? When
Yeah,
will
I was
we-
gonna deal with that under old and new business.
I think we've got 10 minutes now.
Okay.
If we can get
Yeah,
off the table.
hammer some of that stuff
move
out.
along.
So if you turn under tab 3 and go to the very back, there's some blue dividers in there. So beyond the last blue divider is the bid results for the loader.
I have to take off there right at the end, huh?
Yeah, a lot of furious bidding going on there the last few minutes.
Wow.
In 2 minutes, it went up over $1,000 in $100 increments. It was-
Yeah. So, need a motion to accept the bid?
I do.
Motion to accept the bid of $19,300 for the 1997 Komatsu.
Is there a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. While we're under old and new business, if you turn to just past the first blue divider, you'll see Tim's email regarding the second police cruiser. We got a slightly revised quote. His explanation is in there why there is a slight difference. It has to do with our communication antennas that needs to be installed.
Before we go to that, let's
Yeah.
go back to the bids.
Okay.
We just voted to sell the Komatsu.
Yep.
Like to know what the board's pleasure is to do with the fire truck.
It's my understanding we've gotten some interest post-closing.
Yep.
So I make a motion that we put the pumper back on, back out for bid.
I'd like to open that for discussion. Whereas there are other venues to sell things, I'm wondering if we shouldn't have it posted places other than Municipal. Unless you're, which this was the first I ever heard of it
Yeah.
when we did it, but
So did we,
I'm thinking most people now when you wanna sell something, you see it on a Craigslist or Marketplace.
Yeah. I would say as long as we're still following a bid process where it has to come in by a certain date, sealed bid, I would assume.
it didn't make the reserve? No?
No,
It was short of the reserve
Yeah.
but even if we,
by about a little over $1,200 short.
Yeah.
we could post it on those and just direct them to Municipal.
Yeah. Yeah, like share that link.
Just get
Yeah.
it in front of more eyes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, just put the link for Municipal into the listing.
Yep.
I'm fine with that.
And what about the reserve? Would you like me to leave the reserve the same?
I would say leave it the same.
Wanna go up a
I
little
would have
bit?
gone up, I wouldn't have gone any lower than what we did on the Komatsu.
I don't know what the,
Yeah,
don't
what-
remember what.
They weren't that much far apart,
So,
not that I wanna advertise what it is,
Right.
so, cause people ask me, I said, I can't tell you.
Yeah.
It's probably gonna go back out again, so.
Yeah.
You okay with matching the Komatsu
sure.
rate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay.
Okay, where were you directing us in this book?
So, earlier in that same section, behind the first blue divider
Okay.
is, you'll see Tim's email to me regarding placing an order for the second Ford Explorer. And, he realized that we needed to make a slight adjustment in some of the equipment due to a antenna issue. So the bid, basically went up a couple $100 because of that, compared to the one we just picked up today. And HQ has one matching our specs in stock. So if we place the order for that now, we'll probably have it in about 60 days by the time they outfit it and have it ready.
What had we approved for it, like previously?
So originally, the bottom line price was, I should have it right here. So the one we picked up today, net of the trade, came to $49,671.51 after the $1,500 trade for the first 2013. We're trading another 2013 with higher mileage. They're still allowing us to stay in trade allowance on it.
Well, I'm not so sure that we should be trading that in. The other one we did because we couldn't get inspection, and after numerous visits to the dealer, they couldn't
Yeah.
find the issue. Does this have any issues with it?
It does not at the moment, other than Tim mentioned that he felt there was something up with the steering rack in the front of it.
Mm-hmm.
He drove it the other day, and that's not an inexpensive repair. The steering rack is probably a $2,000 to $3,000 repair.
But we haven't had it checked. We don't have any.
So he hasn't had it checked because his intention was to trade it,
Yeah.
and that would leave us with the two 2020s and the 2017.
We're talking about keeping that one as like a multi-use.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for $1,500, it's not worth letting it go, I don't think.
No.
Yeah.
Unless if we had an issue,
Right, I mean, if we could get it checked out first,
yeah.
and then, but otherwise, I'm in favor of moving forward on this vehicle, since we
So-
could get it on the
All
road.
right, so would you like to have us place the order with removing the trade for now, and if we have to dispose of the trade, we can figure that out after the fact?
I make a
Yes.
motion to approve the purchase of the 2020 Ford Explorer less the trade-in.
Okay.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll just stop it there and wait for 1 minute and we can start on the permitting.
Thanks for coming, everybody. And attending on
And you
Zoom.
guys.
Yeah, and Zoomers.
It looks like I think we have representation from almost everyone. The only one is, Scott, do you know if Tim's coming?
Tim's not
Okay,
coming.
not coming. And, Peter's still on vacation.
Peter's still on vacation.
Okay, this evening, thank you for coming, as Sean has already said, but the purpose of this evening's gathering is to try and get feedback on how we can improve the permitting process as a whole, not to get down into the weeds of specifics, but more to make it more aware for an applicant, and more importantly, or just as important, is to make board members and employees that deal with that on a day-to-day basis all on the same page. We've had discussions as a board here, but we felt it'd be best if we could get everyone together. So, before we go too far, I'd like to put Rick on the spot, and since you're usually the focal point of getting the brunt of any calls or dealings, give you the first opportunity.
Two.
Any suggestions or recommendations on information that you think if we gathered for you to give to you from other boards or committees that would help you?
So what as a building official, I deal with basically slopes away from the building, in the area of 3 feet or a little more, from the foundation to the top, because building official deals with construction. As far as code enforcement, I deal with enforcing your zoning rules and laws, which is normally complaint-based. So when people doing that. When it comes time to do a building permit app, somebody comes in, they want to subdivide, of course, you go to the planning board, you got these zoning boards involved in that. On a piece of property, when somebody comes in, they own a lot, and they want to build a home or anything on that lot. What we have done and what does work in Ringe is we send that permit package around. And we normally had Wednesday meetings, but due to different boards and committees, we had a planning director, and then that went part-time, so we would meet Wednesdays and everybody would look at the permit application. At this point, whereas we don't have that luxury with the people in the town office as much anymore, we still follow the process. A building application comes into the building department. The person which would have been Laurie at the time, would be looking at that building permit applicant package.
Mm-hmm.
All right, is there a driveway permit in there? Is there, and there's a whole list of things. Copy the deed, your plans, the application fully filled out. And then what would happen to that file is it would be submitted to the planning board. The planning board looks at it. The zoning board looks at it. Concom looks at it. And any issues or anything that they see may be a concern, they notate that, and then we'll look into it before then. The last phase of that process is it comes to my desk for plan review, for construction review. We deal with everything else prior. If there's a shoreland permit that needs to be done, then that gets taken care of before I even look at the actual construction of that project. And we limit the amount of time that they can have it, that these committees can look at it. You have a little bit more of a unique situation where you have the iWorks program. We have electronic building permits over here as well. However, we don't have it where they supply online and stuff like that. It's all driven just in the building department itself, just for permit generation. So the luxury that you have is somebody can submit online.
Mm-hmm.
We can have these other committees look at that. Hey, even if it's just an email saying there's a permit for a new single-family dwelling. different chairman or whoever they designate, and the committees look it through it and say, yeah, oh, wait a minute, we might have a wetland issue on this property. Or there might be something that during the subdivision regulations that they required that the developer to do, that we may not be privy to that information. So then it gets noted on the file, and when it comes back to Deb, she'll actually say, okay, Rick, this is what we have, and then we start calling around. We need a shoreline permit, we need clarification on, you did not say, you checked the box that said no wetlands on the property, however, we feel that you may have wetlands on the property, and we need you to note that. We need you to take your site plan back, look at what you have for wetlands, and we put it back on. The problem is unless you have, and I'm not saying you should do this, but unless you have certified plot plans, you actually are in going to the property owner to say, yeah, this is what I do or do not have. In a recent case, a property owner who was purchasing the property looked into that and didn't see that there was any wetlands on the property, so moved forward with his plans. Now, I know there was it came back that there was an issue with the size of the building. However, I just did a training on the 2015 building code, which we are under right now. And right there in that training, and anybody can do it, you can go right on to New Hampshire Building Officials Association and look at plan review part 2 of part 1. There's part 1 and part 2, and it's all online now. And look at it, it says right there that there is no, on accessory building, there is no limitations on size. You cannot dictate. So if a building is 5,000 square foot, and the guy says it's residential garage, you can't say because it's 5,000 square foot, this is a commercial building. You're not allowed to do that. It is what they're telling you.
All right, I think you're getting down into
So-
the specifics.
Right,
Let's
so
get,
getting back to it is, on that particular application, now this comes into another problem, and this is what needs to be worked out. I don't see intent to cuts, nor should I. It's not my purview. I don't, sometimes we will see the subdivision come in as a site plan. We're not looking for that. I'm looking for locations of propane tanks. Is there a gas station there? And things of that nature.
what about the order of conditions that are attached with that approval?
If we have them, then yes,
Or
then
the
we need to look
ZBAs,
at those.
okay.
Right. Because it's.
I wanna
it's
go
right in
back
this-
to what you were saying earlier and just ask a quick question about iWorks. You mentioned that the other departments and members can look at that. Do you know, is there a way that we could put in a page or whatever to allow them the opportunity to sign off on it? And are they notified via an email notice when that permit has been filed?
Well, I think Scott could answer more of that from working with the iWorks people and Deb and Laurie, probably more so Laurie, but Scott also, I believe, who sat in through all those things.
Some of it.
So, yeah, there's email correspondence you can send back and forth. And we do it now. It's, for instance, just the other day, Debbie and I were looking at one and there was no address. So we, right there through the program, email the applicant, you need to supply us an address for this.
And they sent it right back.
Yeah, because I had a similar question that Dave had is, I see and I like the process of everyone checking it as it goes in one direction, but making sure that there's a check off in the other direction so that, and again, I'm asking out of my ignorance, to make sure that they are not given occupancy permit before those conditions have been met. I mean, one, for example, is, someone says, well, this is we need to do this in order to construct the property.
Right.
Okay, great, but that needs to be remedied before you can live in the property. But then, because that extra checkoff wasn't there, you're busy, you're doing your thing, you give them an occupancy permit, and then all of a sudden we go back 6 months later because we realize that construction piece wasn't remedied prior to occupancy.
There is a way you can correct that, we did it in Ridge. And how we did that is everybody signs off on the CO. Planning board signs off, zoning signs off, Concom signs off, the highway signs off on the driveway permit, and then fire and building
Okay.
sign off.
But
Can
I-
I interrupt for 1 second? John Shamloff has been trying to say something for about 10 minutes. Go, John.
Hi, so there are, it looks like at least 6 or 7 members of the planning board in this meeting. Can we please take roll call attendance, because this is gonna be considered a public meeting for the planning board? And I'd also kinda like to know who's in the room, since I don't know everybody personally.
I'm not sure.
Lou Marino in the room by himself. Lou Alvarez in the room by himself. Rick Sneak in the room by himself. John Shamloff attending and by myself. Lena Dunsley attending.
John, did you have a question?
Yeah, who else is in the room?
This room.
Well, we're not, you can do it for the planning board, but you don't need to do one for everybody that's here or anybody else that chimes in on Zoom.
So we're not allowed to know who the other participants in the room that are engaging in the meeting is? Or there's no one in the room?
No, he's talking here in the town office.
Debbie, just hold
All
up
right,
the computer
okay.
screen.
Yeah.
So, in the room are Rick Donovan, building inspector, Jim Coffey in the corner, chairman, board of assessors, Laurie Rhodiola, employee of Ringe.
Ouch.
I love you. Jean Cunningham, board of assessors, Meredith way in the back over there, fire chief, and Bob Boynton, chairman of the, conservation commission. And then the selectmen and Scott and I.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So one of the things that can get missed is when you have a planning board puts, and this is why we went this process. They could have done a subdivision, and then 10 years later, all of a sudden now we're finishing the subdivision. And unless we did, and we talked about this just the other day as well, is take those decisions, and we have to hold them into a binder until we start getting building permits, and then put a copy in everyone dealing with that subdivision. So now if there's restrictions, when it comes time, that restriction should be part of that building permit application package. Anything should be. The- Right from the septic, right down to planning board, zoning board issues, anything that's regulated on that property. Now, when the building official gets it, and he's got a time to review the plan, we just have to make sure that everything in the package is, what's in the package, is there anything that we need to know about this property? And then we'll review the building plans once, but seeing all the other signatures clarifies a whole lot of things, because now I know the planning board has seen it. They're gonna pick up things I have no idea about. The zoning board's seen it. They have, I may not know what they had restricted on something, especially if a piece of paper got missed. At one point, when I first took over, we had a 2-drawer filing cabinet in that room. It had violations on properties, but it wasn't categorized, it wasn't tabularized. So you would have to literally sit there and go through 100 sheets of paper and look for, all right, if it's 100 Main Street, is there anything in here to deal with 100 Main Street? You have building files, everything you have on a map, go by lot, map and lot, and everything to do with that property should be in that file, including Meredith's life safety checks. There should be a tab in there, so if anybody comes along, whether I'm here, gone, Laurie, Debbie, Scott, you, or anybody, somebody 10 years from now could open that file and say, we did this dance 10 years ago with these people.
My understanding is that in the file cabinets, it is by, whether it's address, map and lot, and everything is in there. But I
Get
wanna
all your
go,
files to it.
But
Right.
everything
Right.
has always been in there.
Everything.
let me
is in
just close this circle on my question, because I'm gonna ask Laurie too, is that you had mentioned earlier about getting the sign off before the CO is issued. I know, having worked in many cities and towns in New Hampshire, they require the sign off from the departments prior to and afterwards. Laurie, since you've worked with the iWorks, do you know if there's a way a form can be implemented for,
Other members,
to sign off on?
well, we kinda had one, but it never got, none of this was ever done. He just kinda sent a one from Ringe that would be, you know, he would check off if it needed planning board review or whatever, but we just basically take the decision letters, check the property files and do it that way. So as far as there being something in iWorks,
Or can that software,
I can call them tomorrow and see if there's somewhere, okay, just like initials of the planning board chair, the ZBA chair,
Yeah.
the Concom
Yeah.
chair.
we
'Cause
might be able to add, in the software, like when I was receiving the permits, I would assign it to Rick.
Oh, right,
So
right,
right
right.
now, there's,
We could add
Rick is in
people.
there, I'm in there, and Debbie was in there. So if we could add if we could add the conservation, the zoning board, the planning board, maybe check with iWorks and see if we can add them on there, and that way.
be sure to pick up.
Yeah, because
these also.
I like that process of getting it checked prior to, making sure that the planning board, conservation, everybody gets that packet, but then at the end, doing it the second time, so that you make sure that the zoning board, that everything the ZBA asked for was taken care of prior to, because it's a lot tougher as we go back now and say, well, you know, you have a subdivision with 4 houses on it, and your street, you don't have a street name.
My
You know,
only
it's all these
concern
little
there
things,
is
so.
I think it's gonna add money, because if I remember correctly, I think we were able to have it on 3 computers.
Right, 3 user licenses, so
Right.
we'd have to add user licenses to give additional people access.
Right.
I think
So it's
that-
not a cloud-based where they would just.
It's
It is
Cloud-based.
cloud-based, but you
Yeah.
still need to have a user license
I'm
depending on
not
what
sure
level
So
of
if
activity.
it costs.
If that's the
more, but-
case, I could run a report for
You-
any new builds.
Yeah, it could actually be a hard
and
copy.
send- And well, no, it doesn't even have to be a hard copy, I can just run it, save it, and email it to everyone. Here, look at this,
Yeah,
Yeah, because at the beginning.
All right,
Every
hang on,
time
hang
I
on,
submit
hang
it,
on.
though,
I guess.
Jim?
I got a quick question. When we're talking about sending this to the Conservation Commission, the Zoning Board of Adjustment, and the Planning Board, it seems to me that do those boards have a point person that reviews it for the board? Or do we have to wait for the board to have a legally posted meeting? So if the board's gonna approve something, then it would have to be a legally posted meeting.
How we do it?
Unless the board delegates it to one member to do it for the board, okay? And I think if they do that, then that person should be formally assigned and it should be documented, because it seems to me that if you send this to 3 boards, some of which meet not even once a month lately, it could take forever for him to get the permit to go.
But we're not looking for the boards to make a decision as far as, and I'm gonna make up a hypothetical, the zoning board to say, oh, this is wetlands. They're just to raise the point, and the chairman could be doing this because it's not something that you need a vote of the members on. This lot here has a wetlands approval from October 5th, 2019.
Right. And
Just
you-
something to relay the information to Rick so that he's aware of it.
And to further that is, basically they're looking at the site plan. All right, the landowner didn't note any wetlands. Concom may say, wait a minute, this site plan doesn't have any wetlands on it, but there are wetlands, we know there's wetlands on there, so we need another site plan
There may not
to
be a-
delineate where these wetlands are on this in correspondence to the building.
Okay,
Right, so we
Uh,
had discussed.
Debbie,
right, and-
hang on. Bob's had his hand up for a
Oh,
while.
sorry, Bob.
Hi, I had a long talk with people out at iWorks to find out what they could do for the Conservation Commission. And if we can supply them with every layer of a natural resource that we wanna check, so we can look at it on a map and say, oh, there's wetlands on this lot, and they didn't say there were any wetlands. Now, the whole problem was that if we don't have an accurate tax parcel layer, we can't do that kind of thing. That's the biggest problem. I told him, I says, we don't have a tax parcel layer that's accurate. He says, well, there isn't much you can do with us then. You have to get that calibrated more accurately.
You're trying to go to the next step up, which we've discussed as a board previously. We're trying to get the permitting. So if it means that somebody would have to go out there and look at it, if they're that concerned over it, then I think at this stage where we are, the issue that we're trying to resolve at this meeting is getting the information to the code official, and so that not only that he has it, but that you're aware of it, Meredith's aware of it, Peter's aware, and the input can come in rather than a permit being approved, let's say, and then later on after the fact, we get the input from a member or a board or whomever it may be. Oh, you should have known this. Well, we want that info as early as we can.
Well, the problem is, the Conservation Commission does not have the right to trespass on the property. Unless it's a wetland permit and they agree it's a wetland, they sign off on it, then the commission has the authority to go on the property. But if it's a driveway permit that's gonna impact a wetland that's in the forest that we can't see from the road, we don't have a prayer.
When the applicant submits that application, if you have and I'm gonna use you as an example, have a concern, then we would need to get permission from the applicant in order to approve his permit to have the Conservation Commission chairman visit the site. Is there any issue?
If the driveway permit had check boxes,
discussed before that we think we need to add to the building permit also a sign off from the homeowner or property owner saying there are no wetlands on my property, or yes, there are wetlands on my property, and here's where they are-ish. And have them sign off that there are or there aren't. So they are, so at least it's bringing it to the forefront so we know to ask the question, or we can, kind of take a stab at, I guess, at the matter.
I'm gonna let Wendy go, because I'm gonna guess she's thinking what I'm thinking. Go ahead, Wendy.
Hi, folks. I'm a little bit concerned that we're going down a rabbit hole that's really unnecessary. The building permit application in the past has always, I haven't looked at it recently, but in the past it had a certification on it that it identified yay or nay if there were wetlands on the property, and there was a statement that where the
we're trying to get the information of either approvals or orders of conditions that the boards are aware of that Rick may not be aware of. So yes, you're right, it's to give him the information. And in the case where I thought you were gonna go with it, what I would feel uncomfortable with, it's great to have a statement on there from an owner to say, oh, there's no wetlands. Well, I didn't know that was wetlands. That's only a stream. You know,
Well, see,
that type
that's
of
the
thing
How
where,
do you know? You're
well-
not a wetland scientist, I wouldn't know.
and that's why I think the best way from what I'm thinking here is that amongst all the different boards and members here that are looking at this, all being familiar with the town, if there's an area that there's an issue, whether it's a site distance, or whether it's wetlands, or whether it's an order of conditions that may have been, 5 years ago, at least to try and get that information up front so that the applicant's not harmed by us coming back later and saying, oh, by the way, this was a requirement. They'd say, well, I didn't know that.
Right.
That's all, just,
But how do you, like, if I didn't work at the town office, I would have no idea that I can't dig up my backyard and level the whole thing, take all the trees out, fill it in with loam and whatever, and put grass in there and grow a garden. I have the west branch of the Souhegan in my backyard, which, when I looked at the on the overlay map before I bought my house, I didn't have that in my backyard, because the map's wrong. But I didn't know that at the time, so, not that I wanna do that, but, I mean, this is the frustration of, even if you did know that, if you're a potential buyer, or you've owned your home for 10 years, or whatever it is, if you're looking at these maps and you're looking at the overlays, it looks like you have this much when you really have this much,
in a few cases.
many
Wow.
cases.
Laurie?
Well, I just like to say, I mean, I've sat in on a lot of conservation meetings, and I also didn't know anything before working here, but in sitting in on their meetings, I think they're more looking to answer Wendy's question, what are we trying to get at? I feel like they're trying to stop the violations before they happen, which I think that comes long before a building permit is even submitted to the town. It's gonna start with, in order to get your building permit, you need a driveway permit that's been approved. Rick doesn't have, the building department doesn't have anything to do with a driveway permit. That's, they need that permit in order to submit for their building permit. So it's happening yes, the building permitting, the applications do need to be revised, most definitely. But I think that's, to answer Wendy's question, I think that's where I thought this kind of and, the whole process of who it's going through and, who's laying eyes on it and stuff like that.
And my piece is on, again, like I said, it's on the back end, making sure that we're not giving occupancy permits when there are things that have been clearly from the very beginning, from the planning board, zoning board, that those have been laid out, but since it hasn't been communicated properly to Rick, or that someone else didn't go back, then we're finding out after the people are already living in the house.
But it may not even be a house. In this case.
Oh, in that
it
case,
wasn't
but
even a house. They
yeah.
don't even need an occupancy permit.
yeah, no, I'm talking about a couple that we have dealt with that are houses or small subdivisions, and now we're looking and going, okay, this never got done, or this is still undone, and people are living in the houses. So that's the piece that I'd like to see is, yes, we're stopping the violations early, but also making sure that the zoning board and the planning board didn't sit in a meeting and waste their time for something that should be done properly, and then the next person goes, well, why do I have to do that? They didn't do that across the street. And you go, well, we told them to, but we missed it.
I don't know. I don't think we've had any of those cases, have we?
Well, I
The
can
other
see,
point that I'd like to make is that the zoning board of adjustment also hears appeals
But
And all of those files are available in a town, owned Dropbox drive for anyone we can make available to anyone in the community or any board to examine. You know, as far as how we would interface with folks on those boards, if they had commentary or concern, you know, I'm reluctant to have the single appointee point of contact to have discussions personally, because that seems to somewhat subvert the meeting laws. One person on the planning board cannot make or render decisions really on behalf of the board. It would be better if folks, whether it's a commission or a private citizen or a town official, who has a question or would object to an application based on materials that we posted publicly, or has a concern based on that, express that in the public hearing portion of the planning board meeting. And then it's properly documented, and then we know that the property owner and or developer has the opportunity, always has the opportunity, to hear that and respond.
So I agree to a degree. I feel, so what I do now is when we approve something, I disseminate the approval letter with the conditions on it. So then that's what Laurie and Rick were talking about, that we give to them. But it's all well and fine if it's something that's gonna be built in a subdivision, but we have so many properties that were never part of a subdivision. It's, you know what I mean, like the property that we keep talking about tonight, that wasn't part of a subdivision. So there's nothing to reference, there's no surveyor stamp, there's no wetland scientist stamp, you know, like all of that kind of stuff. So, I mean, it's great if we do have that, but if we don't have that, cause it's an existing lot of record, then you're starting from scratch and people have to, you know, we have to figure it out, I guess.
Rick had your hand up. Up. Hang on, Rick's on. Rick?
Well, one of the things is, we need to look at this from the aspect, we're educators. People out there don't know. They don't know your zoning rules. They don't know your planning regulations. They don't know your building codes. And one of the things I've done in all the certification classes and all the training classes I've done, the number one thing is we're educators. We're educating people on what they can and can't do with their land and trying to help them do the right thing. So when we look at things, I gotta look at things in the perspective of, he probably didn't know he was going down the wrong road. So we're gonna work with them to get them on the right road, number one. Number two, the person, how we did it is somebody's delegated from the board to, all right, here's a building permit application, take a look at it. They're not making a decision on the part of the planning board. They're looking at it saying, hey, I think there's an issue here that we have in the plan. This needs to go to the planning board for further review, or zoning, or Concom. I've had the Conservation Commission in Ridge before say, I think we got a problem here. And we say, oh, okay, let's hold everything up and get clarified. What might be the issue, what may not be? Well, they said that there's no wetlands, but I think there's a swamp in the backyard there. Let's put it on hold and then take. And then it might be going back to the septic plan, which was done by an engineer, or even requiring, as I have done, get a wetland a wetland scientist to go flag the land, and then we can move forward from that point. So I like to think that we're more looking at this at a proactive approach as educators, trying to educate people what we can, about our regulations, what you can and can't do with your land, as well as say, yeah, I know that an individual of a planning board or a zoning board can't make a decision for the board, but they certainly can look at it and say, I think we got some issues here. And that's what we're looking for. Or maybe there was a decision made on this piece, and we need to find that letter. Where's that letter? Or where's that decision? And look back at that.
Bob?
Yeah.
You know, you're
Hang on, John.
Part of the problem we've always had, David, is that most people don't get the building permit until they've got a driveway in, until they do excavation, until they do timber harvesting and all of that. So the problem is, by the time the building permit comes in, all the damage is usually done to the property. That's the problem. If the building permit encompassed the whole development process from birth, meaning a driveway, until the roof is on the house, then that would work. But unfortunately, with the timing we have, people do a lot of things before they get a building permit.
Right, and I think to jump over what people's rights are, in other words, if somebody did go to the assessors and they received their intent to cut and they went and they cut and then did something beyond that, that's beyond the control of the town, as Rick mentioned earlier, that then becomes the complaint end of
You can't
code
stop
enforcement.
that.
You
It's
can't,
Violations
Well-
are gonna happen.
But see, with all due respect, David, if we knew that somebody was having a driveway permit put in, we know that they're gonna be doing things to the property. So when all the other permits come through, we can look at it on a map and say, there's a wetland right there, there's a stream right there. We can prevent a violation as opposed to reacting to it. And that's the important part, I think.
but you, as you're saying, Bob, and I think one of the things that Laurie or Rick or Debbie mentioned earlier was making the provisions of a driveway permit part of the building permit process, but that will not address the issue of ramifications after an intent to cut and prior to going for a driveway permit.
But if somebody wants an intent to cut, that doesn't necessarily mean they're gonna put a building in.
Exactly.
They might just wanna cut down some trees.
And that's the point I'm trying to make, is that it has nothing to do with it.
Well, yeah, but so you're suggesting that they get the intent to cut, or they don't get the intent to cut, which happens most often. But let's say they get the intent to cut, goes into Concord for assessment purposes, go to the Board of Assessors and so forth. The Conservation Commission has not seen the intent to cut, or we've seen it, we don't know where it is. On Poor Farm Road, that's exactly what happened. They didn't get a driveway permit, they did not get an intent to cut, they did not get
They
an alternate.
did get an intent to cut, and you had it in October.
No, I should say a wetland, they didn't get a wetland.
Okay.
They didn't get a wetland permit, and they did not get the driveway permit. If the Conservation Commission got a copy of each one of those, we would have said, oh, we have a problem here, but we didn't. That's the problem, that's why he didn't get a wetland permit. And because he didn't get a driveway permit, the commission had no chance to review whether the driveway permit might lead to other areas. If he got a driveway permit, we could warn Rick, hey, there's wetlands on the property, so whatever he's gonna do, make sure you're aware of the wetlands.
But and I'm just gonna stick to the subject of the driveway permit,
Okay?
is that I think if there's a way that the communication with Peter is a driveway permit doesn't get, or it gets conditionally approved based on them filing for a building permit. Because if a driveway permit is a requirement for a building permit, then that's a good process. But just make it the driveway permit conditional. That way there, when they file for the building permit and the driveway goes in, that's when everybody's going to have the opportunity to review it.
But that wouldn't have solved the problem in this particular
All right,
case.
that's a different item. I'm just trying to see if there's a way we can tie in the driveway and the building permit process so that development, Debbie or Laurie mentioned, is that if somebody goes and applies for a driveway permit and Peter issues it and they go in and they just start clear cutting, developing, whatever, Rick's not gonna know about it.
That's right.
So this is, I'm just trying to think of a way. Jim?
Yeah, I would, looking at this from the Board of Assessors perspective, okay, which is very narrow. I mean, these other land use boards have a much wider view or a series of topics. The intent to cut, chapter 79, we got 15 days to turn it around, period, okay? That's it. We have up to 30 days from the time we get it to put a bond on it. So we could sign it and then decide a bond is needed, okay? We have 30 days from the date we sign it to get it to the tax collector, and the tax collector would have it in the tax system that, I wouldn't call it a lien, but there's a pending tax on that property. So if anybody calls in for payoffs and things like that, there's a pending timber tax. It's pretty cut and dry. And the only people, and I think you started to get to it, the only people that can issue a cease and desist is Forest and Lands or the DRA. So, and it's pretty understandable why the state has these regulations, because if they didn't, cutting a tree in New Hampshire would be a nightmare for the people whose business it is. They'd have every town different. So I think for us, the one thing we can do, and I think Debbie does it, is let people know we got an intent to cut. There's a lot of ways to do it. You can post them on the web, get a web page under the Board of Assessors, and just scan them in and put them up there. Or you can email them to people, you can do anything you want.
What do we have now for that process? Is there one?
So, did I not send you guys this?
And
You did.
Yeah.
let me just finish where I'm going, if I could. Because I think you can get rid of us, okay? The other piece, you talk about the building permit, and this is being done, and I think it's being done well, as far as I know. Once a building permit is issued, any kind of a building permit, it would be put into the assessing system, and it would be brought up in the cycle of going through and picking up updates. So if the building permit's issued, it should end up, not the permit, but the knowledge of the permit should end up on that particular record in the
It does.
assessing system, so you can run a report, and you could theoretically hand it to the assessor, here's all the permits.
Yep.
And so, I think we get those fine. The only other thing we have is intent to excavate, and the planning board regulates that. And all we need to know is an illegal permit, illegal pit. We're just taxes. You know, we're the ones that set up the taxing on it. And, but I think we can share what we have, but we can't we can't issue an intent to cut until it's been reviewed by a whole bunch of people.
Okay, but I'm gonna go back to my question, Debbie, because you said, did you not? Yes, I think Scott's put something in our book that
Okay.
I've seen
I just did
earlier.
a brief.
But what is it? Is it that when it comes from the assessors, does it?
So I get the intent to cut, I assign it a number, I scan it, I email it to Concom, and I bring it to the next assessors meeting, and they sign, in the meantime, I've asked, are there any taxes owed, because you can't get an intent to cut if you owe back taxes, unless you get a bond, and we actually had to do that a couple of years ago. And then, then they look it over, they sign it, and then I send it off to Jessica, to the logger, and to the property owner. And it goes in the file, and I also send it to the state.
And didn't you say that they can't deny it?
Right. They can't deny it.
Can't deny it.
I think John is trying to say something
Yeah,
as well.
John's been trying to say something for a while.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to my comment on what Rick said about, having someone, for example, from the planning board to ask, say, if there's a building permit application and there's a question or something like that, if I've interpreted that correctly. We do have someone for that. It's the engineer that the planning board engages to advise us on applications. The planning board is comprised of lay people. Some people have specific experiences in other areas, but for the most part, we rely on the engineer. When we do a subdivision, we rely on the town engineer to review the subdivision plan and assist us in making recommendations. And the best place in that example for expert advice that's bound by a contractual relationship with the town, and is certified by the state of New Hampshire would be the town engineer.
John, this is David. I don't think that we're looking, and we've said it earlier, we are not looking for expert engineering advice. What we are looking for is the input of in your case, the planning board, of conditions you may have knowledge of that are not widely known, and giving you the opportunity, just an opportunity, to look at it and give us feedback as a planning board member, not as an engineer, not as a wetland scientist, but just general knowledge.
And as a board, we speak and we're authorized to speak as a board.
You are, and you have that same authority as a chairman.
In that case, I would defer to the board or the town engineer on behalf of the board.
I think the planning board's driveway regulations that they've been working on will help. I mean, a lot of towns, when people submit for a driveway permit, I think Ringe even does it, is they post a $500 bond, or whatever bond on the permit.
Bob?
Yeah, the problem with the intent to cut as it now stands, it's really only a taxing device. It's for tax purposes, it's not really to protect wetlands or anything like that. As a recent example, we had 275 acre parcel of wetlands that they're gonna do a cut on. They're gonna cut 6 acres. This wetland has a third order stream, the Gridley River going through the middle, and it probably has about 25 different wetlands, and one of them is primary, okay? The owner, we have no idea where he's gonna cut that 6 acres. It could be up in a wetland, it could be in an area that's wider, we have no idea. So what's really needed is something at the local level, other than the intent to cut, that permits the Conservation Commission to go on the property and see where it's gonna be. And in addition to that, there should be a cutting plan of some type. Where are you gonna cut? You're gonna cut, where is that 6 acres gonna be? Without that, we don't have a prayer. In this case here, I had Debbie call him up and he said, oh, there's no problems. I know where the wetlands are now. We have to rely upon the fox to guard the chicken coop. And that's a bad situation.
Jim?
Every intent to cut is forwarded to the DRA, is also forwarded to the Division of Forest and Lands. I'm not saying the idea of having something like that doesn't have merit, it doesn't have a reason, but I don't think it's legal. And I think that's the problem.
Well, I did check with the municipal association, and they said that we can craft some type of ordinance that would allow the commission to go onto the property. A checkbox, are the wetlands on the property? He can see if there's
Well,
wetlands.
that may be possible, but where I'm talking about is, the property owner comes in with an intent to cut. They are responsible for best management practice, or the forester is, or the logger, whoever. They're supposed to use best management practices. If we see a problem, we should be able to get Forest and Lands down here real quick.
Right.
That's what the maps are for, David. You can look on a map and you can say, oh, I can see exactly where the wetlands are, here's where he's gonna cut, and we can catch it right at the point. Desk check, we can desk check, we don't even have to go on the property.
Yeah, you could, Bob, you could queue them up. I mean, if you saw something that was really, looked like it was complicated, could be a problem, and you had the right maps and everything else, you could queue up somebody, you could queue up the forest ranger, okay? They could go take a look at it, and then when they're in the neighborhood, they could stop by and they can go out and look at this stuff.
But if I understand it, is that Debbie gives you the intent to cut notices?
Gives the
Are
intent to cut.
you able to look at it and raise a concern?
All I can do is I can look at what the map lot number is. I go into the website and I see where the parcel is, and I see there's wetlands on the property, but because it's 275 acres, and he's only gonna cut 6, I have no idea whether it's gonna be impacted or not. So if there was a checkbox someplace along the line that says, yes, there are wetlands, then the commission could go on the property.
But that won't keep us from signing the permit.
No,
And-
I know it won't, I know it won't.
Do loggers, I thought loggers had different guidelines than what we would consider a developer going in and developing property regarding wetlands. Is that
Yeah,
Well, some of
somewhat?
them have foresters, like Windblown, or some even Country Club, they have every couple of years, every 5 years or so, they have a forester go in and pick and choose what, so they own 65 acres, and they're gonna cut 60 acres over the course of 60 acres. They may cut 2 trees in that acre, and, you know what I mean? So they're selectively choosing
Selective
which trees
cutting.
they're gonna, yeah.
What I
exactly.
was raising was, I thought that when there are some types of streams, that they're allowed to,
Yes.
drop some brush over it and just
Yeah.
drive right through
They
it.
can do temporary
Whereas
work.
To some degree.
most developers
Right, to some
can't do
degree.
that. And so they do have a different set of guidelines than what our
They have best
zoning was.
management practices, is what they have.
Okay.
Right.
That's what it boils down to.
And, people who have gravel pits, intent to excavate, the planning board can, or anyone from the town can at any time go on that property without permission. So I don't know
With
if,
no notice?
with no notice.
Wow.
That is according to, I asked, the DRA. I asked,
You're saying the Conservation Commission could walk on the property unannounced?
I'm not saying I said the planning board.
Well,
No, yeah, because he said anyone, because it's, an intent to excavate and it's a legal gravel pit, that the town can go on the property at any time.
I think the town probably means the planning board of their delegate. The planning board is the regulating authority, not the selectmen. We've gone on gravel pits with the owner to look at the assessments, the areas reclaimed, not reclaimed. We've done that. Not very often, but we've had occasion to do that as board of assessors.
Any other new points that need to be brought up?
Hello, this is Dee.
Hi, Dee.
Hi. I think that as much as I appreciate we want to do something simple, I think that it's important that we probably set up a matrix of which boards need input into which things. I don't think the planning board really touches the intent to cut. I think that there was some good points brought up about folks who may not get a chance to take a look at something. When we're talking about the planning board letting somebody know about special conditions, they're posted, a lot of the special conditions are put in the notes. But then again, I also know that we've heard Rick doesn't really inspect everything that we have. If there's a certain drainage problem, he may not inspect that. So I don't think we yet have an idea of, I think we have to start with a process flow that goes back even one step further. What is each permit? Who needs to touch it? And what types of things can be on it? And then we can talk about process flow and timeline. Because it sounds like intent to cut has a very specific timeline. And if we don't have that all in one place, I don't think one size is gonna fit all.
Anyone else? Bob?
Yeah, I want to put an advertisement in again for more accurate tax maps, because we're talking about whether we have the right to trespass and so on and so forth. With accurate tax maps, a lot of this can be done behind a computer without having, ever putting foot on the property. And so I don't want to say step 2 or step 3, whatever it is. I think we need more accurate tax maps right here and now. Without that, we're flying in the dark. And I think you're aware, maybe, I think Debbie, Laurie put them in the notes, but Debbie was aware that the Conservation Commission has stated that we're willing to put up half of the annual $45,000 fee for 3 years. So that cuts the cost down considerably. And why do we want to do that? Because we feel the only chance we have of protecting the natural resources in the coming years is to have accurate tax maps.
So I had Tim Fountain give us another quote, like you did a few years ago, that the Board of Assessors presented. So he is willing to come give a presentation to all of us, on the second meeting in August. What was that, the 25th or something like that? 25th. The benefits and whatever, and like he said, the Concom voted to pay for half of it, so it's like $145 over 3 years.
Yeah.
And they're gonna pay half of that, and then the annual fee to maintain the maps is around $3,000, which is, we pay SWRPC anywhere between $2,200 and $3,000, depending on how many subdivisions, et cetera, we've had, so it's really not and it's a win-win for everybody.
And I would just back that and what Bob said earlier about him talking to the people at iWorks, because that would kind of be the desk check then if, I mean, you could do it now without, you know, the accurate tax maps, but when a permit comes in, you can actually go on and click on the map
Yeah.
in
And you can
iWorks,
look right at
and it
those.
zooms right in, and then there's a box that pops up, it's GIS layers, you check off the streams, the wetlands, slopes, whatever you want, whatever layers are there, and it brings it up and shows it right there, so the person that's getting the permit can just say, okay, yep, there's wetlands on the property, and then compare it to the site plan.
Yep.
And the applicant can do the same thing.
Yeah, that's what
The
I was just
applicant would have
saying.
access to it.
Exactly.
The comment I'd like to make, and Debbie actually brought it up, was, once you make this investment, it's not like buying a loader. When we bought the Komatsu, it cost a lot of money, right? And so we wear it out over time, it's a capital investment. This is a different kind of capital investment. Once we have accuracy here, if we keep it up, and it's not really much more than what we pay now, it just goes on and on and on. You can't wear it out,
Right.
okay? I suppose you could destroy the data, but you really can't wear the thing out. So I think in the long run, it makes sense to do. And there's, you know, the Conservation Commission has an interest in it.
It would
Obviously,
benefit
tax
everyone.
maps, accuracy, the assessors have an interest in. And thirdly, who creates changes in this thing? The planning board. When they merge lots, subdivide lots, and do this and do that. So the planning board is a party to this too. We're not
It would
saying
help the
they should give us money,
ZBA
but
also,
they're a party to it.
you know, when they're trying to decide if there's wetlands on a property, or if there's slopes on a property, or if there's adequate parking, or whatever, you can,
And not only that, but what'll
Sales
come with
pitch.
this is an online thing where the
Right.
applicant can look at their property on it.
All right, anything else regarding the permitting process?
No,
sorry, we digress.
Thank you for coming.
permission to leave.
Hey guys, I'd like to chime in a second.
Yep,
I think Dee brought up a really good point about really understanding the permitting process and exactly what information it would be required. And I want to go back to something Rick said earlier in the meeting. And his objective in all of this is to help the applicant do a better job of putting their permit application together and addressing all the potential pitfalls. I think that's probably step number one, is to identify, like Dee mentioned, the permitting process, where we are having issues, where there are pitfalls, and making sure that that additional information or warning, if you will, is provided to the applicant ahead of time, so they have the benefit of understanding where other people have maybe tripped up in the past. So they get a leg up on that.
Maybe
I'm
we
just
could do
going
some kind of
through-
checklist
We have
for
a
the
checklist.
applicant,
We have a checklist.
it says wetlands
Yeah,
on it.
I was actually just going through the building permit application. I mean, of course, it does all the boilerplate, know what your zoning ordinances are, know your subdivision regulations, know your site plan review regulations. It gives the table of dimensional controls. And, you know, right there on the application, it says that I certify that that I am in compliance with all local laws and so forth. But no
that note as well, Wendy, is the fact that I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, because I know I deal with 2 towns, so I know in Ringe on our site plan, it says site plan drawn to scale, showing all wetlands or any other issues that may be pertinent to this.
Yeah, that's
building,
absolutely
so.
true when a plan needs to come before the planning board, but that's not necessarily true if the lot already exists, and they're looking to build, a building on that land or use it for some particular purpose.
It does state on the driveway permit, but not.
That's when, being aware of our wetland, restrictions is important. Even just making a simple statement that this is what we consider a wetland and no impact to wetlands is allowed per our zoning. Just making a simple statement like that could be very helpful to an applicant.
Is that on the driveway permit, Wendy?
Her recommendation is that
I
we
would
have
put that on the
something
driveway
like that on
permit
the
as well as
permit.
the building permit.
I like that.
What's up, Craig?
Okay, I would just like to take 1 minute here. I'm a very process-oriented person as well. When Dee started talking, I took a couple notes to myself. And I'll just give you a quick analogy. When a pilot, and Luke can attest to this, Lou Alvarez, goes through to start up an aircraft, they normally go through a checklist. It's a very detailed checklist, and what's on the line, they're 10, 50,000 feet up in the air, everything's gotta be right. I would capitalize on something like that, whether it's a virtual tool or a paper tool, and build a checklist that people can go through. And that it's actually maybe 2 pages long or whatever, and then behind it have reference tabs that have detailed information. And allow for individuals to sit down with the town representative if they get stuck, and maybe even somebody who reviews the process before it gets too far and gets a warning, shout over the shoulder that you've forgotten this, or this. I would also encourage you to speak with, I don't know, half dozen, a dozen people that have recently gone through this process and ask them their opinion. Where is it stuck? Where did you have difficulties? How can we as a town help you? Anyways, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm kind of blinded by who else is on there. Is there anyone else on there that had a comment?
Anyone else have
I'd like
any
to
other
speak.
comments? On Zoom? Everybody's muted themselves.
Okay, I think what we're gonna try and do is come up with some.
I was just wondering maybe if we should have that, conservation component as part of the driveway permit that we as a planning board did, or some kind of wetland, because we didn't talk about that at all, really. We were just talking about the structural thing of putting near the driveway and those regulations, not, so much the, wetland components.
Right. Well, that's why we sent the driveway regulations out to all the boards for their review and comments, but not many people responded, so.
The commission's not on that distribution list. We never received
I don't
driveway.
believe we've seen them yet at the zoning board.
Who did I email them to? Yeah, I sent them out to the zoning board. I'm pretty sure, I will double check who I sent them out to, but I thought I had all the boards on there. Definitely, yeah, I don't know. Highway and fire, police, building. I thought I put all the boards on there. If I didn't, I apologize. But I will check that out tomorrow
Both.
Did.
and resend
Yeah,
it. I
both.
sent it to
Highway.
everyone.
Both.
Fire chief,
Yeah,
ZBA,
ZBA, yep.
conservation.
Conservation, yep. Yeah, I
Yeah.
did send them to everyone.
yeah.
So, and I resent it
Even
out
the
yesterday.
assessors.
Yesterday morning
I
at
thought so.
9:05.
Yeah, I resent it out yesterday morning also
Yeah.
to all the boards, and
parties involved.
David, on the driveway permit, is
From land
is there
use?
be a period of intervention where we have X number of days to review it before it actually, the driveway gets constructed? That's important. I mean, if he goes in the next day, he cuts it, and then cuts the driveway in there.
Wendy, what's your email?
Again, this meeting was to get everyone's input into it. Now we have to somehow come up and craft
Okay.
a step-by-step process that will work for the applicant, the town, the boards, to make it work. We good?
Probably, Dave, you could probably task each group with some recommended things to go onto a checklist. I think that'd be a fair way to make sure that you guys aren't having to do that alone and we're all pitching in and contributing.
Well, I thought that's what this meeting was for, and I've been trying to write things, anybody made a recommendation, so that we can get them addressed. If you have any recommendations, by all means, email them in to me and we'll add them to the list so that it's part of the process.
Well, and I think the planning board's different, Dave, because we have a whole list of exemptions or things that, I mean, that list for us could be 20 items long of things that we could put on a checklist. So I don't want to try and do that in a meeting where I can not hear when the microphone's turned or whatever is, I don't think we've been in a mode where we've been tasking to have a whiteboard to say, did we get them all? That type of thing. So, I'd say if you want to let us do that at our next meeting, I don't know what we have on our agenda, but we may have time.
Good.
If I could step in at this point, just to reiterate, the planning board actually just deals with subdivisions, and a lot of the individual homes would actually go through just the selectmen. And I don't know, Rick, is there a regular checklist for them as comprehensive as the one that we have for the planning board?
What?
We have a checklist for when someone is submitting a building permit, yes, and if all that information isn't there, then I contact them, or Debbie will contact them and tell them that we need, the septic approval, or we need this, or we need that, so there is a checklist on there, but I think what the selectmen are looking for is, can we add anything, and do you guys have any recommendations for us to add to that checklist?
And Lou, my point to your comment is where you say that the planning board deals with only subdivisions. I think that's one of those pieces that we need to focus on. And Rick talked about if there's a subdivision, then every home built in that subdivision should have a packet of your notes and exceptions and whatever in that packet. And then that piece would be, whoever it is could look at and go, take a quick walk and go, yes, every part of the subdivision has been met, so I can now give this home their occupancy permit. Because once they're there, it's very difficult to then start tearing something up, which could hamper their ability to get to and from their home.
Well,
Actually, all of your approvals and all of your meeting minutes are supposed to be submitted with a copy with the application.
But I think where Rick was saying is making sure that every one of those has it, and that it's just clear, and just better communication, better follow through with it is, I think, one of those pieces that this whole process is trying to work out as well.
Yeah. One thing before we move on, I just wanted to make sure that the Conservation Commission, the Planning Board, and the Board of Selectmen are aware that they have the ability to chime in for any of our applications that come before the DBA for a special exception. And that we are, by our zoning ordinance, required to take that into account
think it's teamwork is
Yeah.
what we need. And again, in timely manner of these decisions being put in that map and lot file so that it's there for review for everybody.
Yeah, when there is a special exception, the Conservation Commission has not been on the property. Okay, so we don't know if they should get the special exception or not. We don't have authority to go on the property because only a wetland permit gives us authority to go on the property unless that can be changed. And because the tax maps are so inaccurate, we can't do it on the computer, so we really don't know.
Can you go back and rephrase what your question is?
Well, it wasn't a question, it was a statement.
Okay, special
In the
exceptions,
special exception, the Conservation Commission has probably not been on the property. We don't have the right to go on the property right now.
wait a minute, but to get a special exception, I'm assuming you're talking about wetlands?
Wetlands.
Okay. Is the Conservation Commission notified that an application has been submitted for a special exception on wetlands? I just wanna make sure where the process
No, yeah,
is.
we do see the letters that go out that say on this date, we're gonna have the following subjects to discuss, and one of them is a special exception for that,
Okay, okay.
Except we haven't been on the property. We don't have the access to go on the computer to look at it, so we really can't comment on it, and that's the problem.
But the ZBA hears the special exception,
Mhm.
they go and walk the property, and it's a public hearing, so abutters are allowed to come, conservation could come,
That would
because-
be good, that would be good.
and we do it, we do it.
Yeah, they're posted, they have to be
Yeah.
posted. by-
And we ask the applicant, hey, can we come to, it's a Saturday morning, 2 weeks from whatever,
Okay,
and they give us permission, and usually they're there.
so if we have concerns at that time, we can go out with the.
Yes.
That's ideal.
Yeah.
That's ideal.
So instead of it just being posted, maybe like have it like email them like directly, like to tie in the communication
They
with the
do,
ZBA. Yeah.
Well, we don't get an email. Yeah, we get an email, but it comes from Laurie, I think.
Which is fine, you don't care who it comes
No,
from.
not now.
Right.
All right,
Good meeting. Good
all right, thank you very much, all good suggestions, we're gonna try and keep this on the front burner and get it, addressed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zoomers.
Too.
Let,
Yeah, I like that.
5-minute break.
Good night, Rita, thank you.
Is there any more entertainment value that I can sit here on the corner and watch? The entertainment's on.
I think our next thing's non-public anyway, you'd have to leave. I just ended up with freckles on my hands because I floated right about here.
Waking it up.
Okay. Do we have any new or old business
The only other, old business I have, we're gonna take a pass on the LED street lighting till next
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
So we got a notice in there, before the, loader bids. There's a note from Harvard Pilgrim. They are going to be giving us a 15% credit on our April bill that won't hit until September as part of the COVID relief. And the question Roger has is, of that 15%, do you want that all to go to the town, or do you want to give 15% of the 15% back to the employees, to give them, their share of that relief?
Yeah, I would think we would.
Yeah.
I think I just have
Yeah.
a vote on that to be.
Yeah.
Motion to, of the 15% rebate we're getting from Harvard Pilgrim, distribute the employees 15% back to them.
Is there a second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you.
I'll add one thing too for
Sure.
new business.
Hang on,
Yep.
back. 15% of what?
Of the 15%
No,
rebate.
no. It's a question to Scott.
Oh,
We're getting 15% back from Harvard Pilgrim of,
Of our, April
Oh, just the April? Okay,
Just the April
okay.
premium payment,
Oh,
but it
okay.
won't hit, we won't see the credit until, I think, the September bill.
Okay, Sean?
So I went on Saturday and visited the Green Center. Spoke with Tina a little bit, and she had mentioned, and then followed up with an email to me, so it'd be official. Like she was asking if they could start accepting donations on Saturday afternoons after 12 o'clock, so like 12:30 to 3 or something, while they already have volunteers there, because I guess the Friday part has become a little bit challenging, like having someone go in on Friday afternoon, evening, and then Saturdays as well,
So is this in lieu of Friday or in addition to Friday?
in lieu of Friday.
I thought they were limiting the number of volunteers so that there was only one person at the door and one person inside, so that they could have more people inside. If they add more volunteers inside, then that's less people they can have inside.
True, and it wasn't that busy Saturday. She said it hasn't been as busy as she thought it would be, so people are slow to, be going down there. So that's all she asked, because it wouldn't be while it was open to the public. Like, they'd accept the donations after those hours.
Okay, so they'd be closed.
So it'd be after the hours when,
Yeah, because they're open 9 to 12 now.
okay,
So then they were just looking to accept donations on the same day, but from like 12 or 12:30 to 3.
I almost think I just think that'd be more confusing, because then you've got people showing up and then they'd have to come back that same day to do donation.
well, it's either the same day or
Right.
or Friday. I have no
Yeah.
problem as long as there's a delineation of time, and I don't mean minutes, of when they close to when they would accept.
So it would be like an hour.
Yeah,
In
that'd
between?
be fine, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I mean, yeah.
Okay. I'll let her know. Thank you.
Yep. Speaking of the Green Center, I was here on Saturday, and I would say probably about a half a dozen people were let into the building to use the restroom in this building.
Mm-hmm.
And I and the police chief have a little bit of an issue with that. This is supposed to be a secure building, and we've got people coming in, and including children, using the facilities. The suggestion is that perhaps we get 1 or 2 porta potties out here for that purpose.
So for the
Instead-
farmer's market.
For
So
the
that's-
farmer's
yeah,
market,
yeah.
So that this building isn't,
I'd never even thought
I
that
didn't-
would have even been an option
How do they
of
get in?
allowing.
Well, I let him in, like, or Shauna. Yeah.
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 Okay.
Yeah, that shouldn't even be an option.
Okay.
It's a farmer's market.
Yeah, it wasn't. It was for vendors, the people that signed up for it.
I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't even make that an option.
yeah,
Okay.
I mean, if there's money in the budget to
Yeah.
take one of the porta potties from the park or something and move it down here, or add another one down here.
Yeah, we haven't put any down there, so.
So,
And inconspicuous,
Yeah,
maybe
like,
on the backside of
not like in the
too.
front parking lot.
Yeah.
You don't want it right up on the median?
Not anywhere the employees park.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hot day may not be pleasant.
yeah, just make sure you don't back into it with your car.
All right. Okay.
Oops.
Yeah.
Tipped it over. That would make her.
That's it.
That's all I got.
That's all I know.
We're gonna be going into non-public,
Correct.
in you'll need to recuse yourself.
Okay.
So you wanna do the motion?
Motion to go under non-public under RSA 91A3. Matters we've discussed public could likely adversely affect the reputation.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.